Guru Nation, I wanted to get into uh, creating this piece of content, whether you're listening to it or watching it, to motivate some people out there. So right now it's pretty tough, job market, unless you're at a site, which even some sites is tough. There are tailwinds though. There's a significant amount of new studies I see coming up. And there's also this push for like streamlined efficiencies, this whole AI slash tech stuff that is making things, I guess, easier in a way. It's at least removing some of the grunt work from some of the day-to-day jobs. Uh, I think data entry is one that's coming up soon. Stay tuned for more announcements on that one. But there's basically three areas that you can focus on if you're someone in this space or somebody that wants to join this space. And there's way more than three, but I think three buckets that each bucket kind of covers the majority of these subsets. So it's the clinical operations, which yes includes patient recruitment. It's the regulatory side, so compliance, filings, all that kind of stuff. And then the science side. Now, ideally, you want to be a generalist. You want to be comfortable talking about and having experience, ideally, with all three aspects. And all three aspects relate to each other. And at the smaller companies, it's easier to see this relationship. At the bigger companies, it's harder, and that's where you get specialization. You kind of get lost in the sauce, if you will. But I think to keep yourself going, to keep your career I guess, safe or relevant, you need to start looking at all three of these aspects. And I think the ClinOps, most people get in at a site level. So the ClinOps becomes, I guess, the first thing most people master or get experience with, unless they get their first job in regulatory. So then they're not really on the ClinOps side. They're more on the regulatory side. ClinOps, the way I define it, is conducting the study visits, which includes screening, which includes pre-screening, which therefore brings up recruitment. But the science stuff connects everything together. And this is where therapeutic area expertise matters. And the way you have to learn these things and the way you will eventually connect to these things, because this is a complex industry. And this is an industry full of specialists. The generalist will survive, but the specialists are also needed. You need to be both. You need to be a generalist for yourself, and more likely than not, a specialist for a company at any given time. Now, as you upgrade your influence in the space and within your organization, they'll start giving you more tasks. You ultimately get these generalist skills. But you have to find a way to make yourself learn as much as you can. And one of the best ways to do it, and this is why I start featuring some biotech companies and profiles on this channel more and more now, is studying specific companies. So find small companies, small biotechs, for example, that are doing novel cutting edge things, or at least trying to. So in my case, there's been several that I've mentioned before on this podcast, but one of them was Aquestive Therapeutics. They're doing the oral epinephrine um, rescue med for anaphylaxis shock and or anaphylaxis in general. They should have an FDA approval. Hopefully, it's not financial advice. They should have an FDA approval coming up soon. When I studied that stock and I did my due diligence, I had to learn a whole bunch of stuff about epinephrine and about the mechanism of action and about the other applications for epinephrine and about what's the standard PK and what's the pharmacodynamics. And you really can't, like, if you don't find something like similar to that constantly to learn with the specificity of detail that is required to be not just a good investor, but a good employee or a good individual working in this space, it's very easy to get stuck in your day-to-day rut. And if you work at a site and you're lucky enough to work at a multi-therapeutic site like Yuma Clinical Trials, you don't know how good you have it. But let's just say you work at a site that's not multi-therapeutic. You're still learning different mechanism of action. You should be curious about a new study when it comes to your site. Like, I don't care if you're the patient recruiter or the study coordinator, or whatever you're doing, regulatory. I encourage everyone to take an interest in the science and the mechanism of action of whatever studies they're working on. Number one, if you're in any kind of patient-facing role, it's going to help you communicate better to the patient more about what they would want to know. And yes, you're not a clinician, it's important, blah, 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 all those disclaimers. But do it for yourself, and then an ancillary benefit is you can have a more informed discussion with the study participants. We've had so many cool drugs come through Yuma clinical trials, and I don't know if it's because I'm paying attention more, but they seem to be way more interesting to me than they were when I first got started in this space. I mean, we're talking about like the amount of innovation happening right now in research, I think is all-time high. And the FDA administration is working towards even more things like rare disease. They're trying to push more rare disease research. They're trying to push more of this like one and done kind of treatments. Psychedelics is a big one. Psilocybin or DMT. There's another company if you're interested in that space called Atai Life Sciences, ATAI. I'm trying to get their founder on the podcast. Uh, that's the kind of stuff that we haven't seen 2 decades ago. Like, yeah, we saw in like the most unique stuff we saw back then, I think, was CAR T um, therapy, which is kind of taking a backseat now to companies like Iovance that are doing the tumor infiltrating lymphocytes, which is literally the patient's own lymphocytes being infused back into them. CAR T is allogenic. It's one to many. We're going to start seeing a lot more of that. I think with the new administration, the pathway that they're putting forward on the regulatory side, but also with technology and AI helping on the ClinOps side. So it's in your own best interest to study as much of this stuff as you can. Find something that if you don't know where to start, just look at the companies doing studies at your site. Or if you're a CRA, really try to understand the drug that you're working on. Like, I know they're not as cool as what I just described, but you can get very educated on your field if you just learn the mechanism of action for that drug, how it's unique compared to other similar drugs, how it's different. If you understand the primary endpoints and then you understand the efficacy assessments and then the safety assessments. Like, if you just learned that stuff, first of all, it's going to force you to learn a lot of other things like con meds, and you're going to start seeing that anyways if you're a coordinator or a CRA, so you don't really have to go out of your way to learn that. But no one's pushing you to learn these other things. And I'm encouraging you to start doing it. And you might say, well, I'm not really interested in science. I'm just in this industry because I know how to do regulatory. That's fine, but maybe you'll surprise yourself. You know, when the moment we choose to stop learning and growing, bad things happen. I don't want to say die because that's dramatic, but bad things start happening, and maybe your career prospects start dying off too. Maybe that's a leading indicator. I think it's in our DNA as human beings to try to learn new things and try to explore. And you might have to force yourself in your work to do that. But your employer is going to notice slowly. Your colleagues are going to notice slowly. You might find new interests. I never thought I would actually be interested in investing in biotech stocks. Early in my career, I got burned doing that. I mean, I was basically gambling. Well, it wasn't until I started doing due diligence on these things and really getting in the weeds that I actually started enjoying it. And then you start realizing what's special versus what's like regular, right? And then you start figuring things out like how to price the risk and all that stuff, which I'm not going to get into. It doesn't mean you're going to get into biotech investing. That's just my example of how I'm growing in this career. I've been in this career over 2 decades now. I could have easily just stayed in my lane, stayed in psychiatry, stayed in CNS, just do that. You're good at that. You know that. Just grow really big at that. I chose not to, and I'm glad I did. Now, if you do choose to stay in your lane, I have good news for you too. That's okay. Guess what? Your industry, your therapeutic area is always changing. There's new treatments coming out all the time. You should be reading things on PubMed. If you are in, let's say, psychiatry, you should be up to date on all the latest peer-reviewed, at least the most important peer-reviewed articles for your therapeutic areas of interest. So let's say you're in psychiatry, you should know what's new for schizophrenia, PTSD, depression, Alzheimer's. You should be reading peer-reviewed articles. If you don't know how, you should really slow down and read them. I might actually do a deep dive on analyzing a stock and then reverse engineering, showing you guys how to use peer-reviewed articles to study your area of interest. Um, and again, I'm not trying to push stocks on people, and I'm not even trying to push that you become an investor. I'm trying to push that you grow your career, whether you're a site owner, whether you're a tech vendor, whether you're an employee, you should be learning and keeping your mind engaged. And no, you're not getting paid for it. And people are going to say, well, why do I do that if I'm not getting paid for it? Well, because that's how you grow. And that's how you keep your career safe. And that's how your 10 years from now, your future self's going to say, thank you so much for doing that because I didn't realize there was a whole new world of opportunity here. And people who remain stagnant and don't adapt and don't learn and don't grow, they get passed up by people that do. And so you can even take this framework for learning and going deep on a therapeutic area and use it on AI, for example. Like you can go deep on AI. It's a lot more practical to go deep for people in clinical research space on therapeutic areas. But if you wanted to go deep on the latest natural language processings or whatever, you totally could. I'm not going that route. Uh, Again, my framework tends to be centered, besides clinical research, it tends to be centered around investing. So I am interested outside of research in cryptocurrency. I am interested outside of research in things like AI from a somewhat of a superficial level, although I'm find myself learning more about nuclear energy and things like that, which I never expected to. And because of the investment angle again, I'm interested in it. So find your thing, but find something that has practical applications to our industry and to your career, which I really think the low-hanging fruit is the science side. Because from my observations, and this is random musings from the clinical trials guru, for over 2 decades, you'll find, let's say, a monitor, or let's say a coordinator. It's very easy to just be a monitor. And do that for the rest of your career. Nothing wrong with that, by the way. But it's very easy to stop growing and stop learning because no one's pushing you to. Because if you do your job good enough, or even great, you'll always get more work. And maybe you'll learn a new thing or two here, like, hey, I worked on that drug that just got approved. I was doing the studies 8 years ago. But then if somebody asks you like the mechanism of action, well, I don't know, but I saw some side effect. I saw some SAEs or whatever. I saw dramatic improvements. I mean, that's good enough, but that's superficial level. If you were just to go a little deeper on some of the science stuff that, again, no one's encouraging you to do, no one reads those investigator brochures. I don't think CRAs read them. I don't think CRCs read them. If you are a CRA or a CRC or a project manager that actually reads the investigator brochure, drop a comment. I've never read one, by the way, and I am interested in this stuff. But I have read peer-reviewed journals on compounds that I invest in or I'm thinking about investing in. And I just mentioned the three biotechs that I'm really bullish on. Not financial advice, but I mentioned which ones they are. And they're from all completely different realms. One is in the allergy space, one is in uh, second line and first line treatment for cancer, some rare, some not so rare cancers. And the other one is in psychiatry with the psychedelics and DMT. So totally different, but I force myself to understand the latest happenings. And these peer-reviewed articles, if you go to PubMed and just search for a uh, investigational product, compound name, you'll find a bunch of stuff on it. Like here's a homework assignment if you want to take this challenge. Take whatever study you're working on if you're a coordinator or a CRA. If you're working on multiple, just pick one you like the most. Go to PubMed and search that drug, and then start reading the peer-reviewed research and go to the earliest studies and then go to some of the middle ones and go to the later ones and really slow down, force yourself to understand it. When you don't know a term, Google it or ask AI, ask your favorite AI, hey, take a screenshot of what you're reading. Hey, I don't understand this. Explain this to me like I'm a high schooler. It will do a great job teaching you this stuff. You're basically giving yourself a course on a very specific niche. This is how you become a generalist and a specialist at the same time. I'm telling you, if you ever have a job interview and they ask you something about, well, tell us a little bit about what you did in the past or whatever, however they frame it, you can always come back to and demonstrate your knowledge in that particular compound. Just say something that you found interesting from your own research and then tie it into how you use that during your work or what you observed without breaking confidentiality. PubMed is all free, open source stuff. You're going to impress people. You're going to stand out. It's not guaranteed that you're going to get hired, but you're going to stand out. And then maybe you'll find some new interests. This is how humans have evolved to become human beings. They don't progress by just doing the same thing over and over and over again. Yeah, you get good at that thing, but you also lose, I think, what it means to be human by accepting the status quo. And then that's how, if everyone does that, we don't have any progress. So, not my usual type of video, but if you start seeing me do some of these deep dives on biotechs or whatever, just know why I'm doing it. I do think it's been beneficial to me. It continues to be beneficial to me. I would have been bored a long time ago, I think, as just a site owner doing the same kind of studies over and over again if I didn't have ancillary interests in this space. And it helps you communicate better with doctors. These monitors, most of them don't know anything about the drug. Imagine if one of them did a deep dive, even just 1 hour a week on whatever drug their PI has the study on. And they just mentioned it in their conversation with the PI at their monitoring visit. That PI would be impressed. I'm a site director. I've never really had monitors talk to me about science before, ever, in like 20 years. Well, I don't want to say ever. There's has been some, but it's not the norm. It's definitely not the norm, and it's in your interest to start doing it for yourself. Forget about anyone else. Forget about impressing other people. That's all like nice side effects. Just do it for yourself to keep yourself engaged with your work, to show you better orientation of where you should be pointing your career trajectory going forward. I mean, you can find new trends quickly. Like imagine if you were early on the psychedelic space, you would have become a specialist in that space rapidly. You would have been promoted quicker. There's just less people that are knowledgeable about that stuff that also have the skill set you have that are watching this right now. So hopefully you find some value out of this. I don't even know what it's called, but it's something I've been doing. I think other people should do, and I'm amazed. We get very good at what we do with regulatory. We get very good at what we do with ClinOps. But very few people tie all those loose ends together or connect all those dots with the science. And at the end of the day, we are doing science. Like regulatory is not science. ClinOps a little closer to science, but it's not the science. And it's just amazing how many people ignore the science, including myself, until maybe just 5 years ago. I think right around COVID. I don't know if that's correlated or just uh not related at all, but that's when it was for me, and I'm glad I did. And it actually made me uh, wealthier, not to mention more knowledgeable. So hopefully it can do the same for you. Not necessarily as to be a stock investor, but to be a more well-rounded individual in this space. I think we need to focus on the science a little bit more. Like, subscribe, comment, share. Talk to you later. Bye bye.